Hello, everyone. It's the last week of classes, well, except for us, but for most other classes, finally. I feel like this semester went really quickly, though, actually, for me at least. All right, it is 6 o'clock. Let me get rid of the waiting room and share. All right, welcome everyone. I'm going to talk about a few things first, and then we'll do the in the news presentation. But Keely, Isabella, and Ayana, I made you co-hosts already, so make sure you accept the just accept that or whatever. All right, we are in week 7, and we're going to be talking about the big topic that's always in the K-pop headlines. Not always, but it has been a lot recently. Race, cultural appropriation, and all that stuff in K-pop, which I'm very excited to talk about today. So first, I'm going to go over some reminders and review some stuff for upcoming assignments, and then we'll hear from our in the news presenters. Then we'll talk about the course content this week, and then I'll just mention your after class assignments. So reminders, the last plenary session is actually next week. It's not today. So we do have a plenary session that you are required to be at next Wednesday, December 13th at 6 o'clock p.m. like normal. Unfortunately, that's how it works out in the fall semester, as it ends up being on the finals week because we have the for some reason there's a reason for it. It's kind of complicated and annoying, but it's just how it works out. So your final paper is due next week as well, and it's due on Friday, which is December 15th, and it's due by 11:59 p.m. So that's pretty normal. So let me talk about the final. So 15 points of the final are going to be, so first of all, your final paper is an updated version of your midterm paper. So you're basically just going to be submitting your midterm paper with some stuff added to it. Okay. So you're not rewriting. Well, you might have to rewrite some things. You're not writing a new paper, though. You're building off of what you've already written. So format and style is going to be 15 points. Times New Roman or Calibri font, 1-inch margins, double spaced. The final, if you read, I changed this just because of what I was seeing from the midterms, needs to be 1,000 words minimum. So you really should, most of you have already hit this with your midterm, or a lot of you have anyways. But some of you who missed a lot of parts of the midterm, you really probably need to add those things that I have told you to add, along with what you need to add for the final paper in order to get to this minimum. So, and I will be a stickler about this as well for the format style. So it really should be minimum 1,000 words. So you need to make the corrections to your midterm that I point out. So if you looked at the Word document that I gave you, there's tons of comments. I have a bunch of edits that I made. You need to go through and make sure that you correct your midterm paper based on what I've edited and commented. And that's 20 points. So then you need to add your interpretation, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth in a moment. But it's basically thinking about K-pop music videos in the way that the people we've been reading since week 5 about traditional Korean elements. And then last week we talked about products and branding. And this week we're talking about race and cultural appropriation. So you need to have something similar or on that line of that bigger picture that's going on with the music video. And that's what you're writing about for your interpretation or what you should be trying to do. Now, okay, I actually decided to change this. So EndNotes, I was told, or I just learned from Nada actually, that Google Docs doesn't actually support EndNotes unless you add this like thing to it and whatnot. So it can be EndNotes or footnotes. I've decided to make it that. You know, as long as you have one of them, they are 20 points, and make sure that they are part of that is judging if you've put them into the correct citation style, which many of us did well on the exit quiz, and we seem to understand what the citation style should look like at least. So you know, just make sure you double check it. And remember, you need at least 3 sources, which most of you are going to have more than that, because between like the introduction, the background that a lot of you wrote for your midterm, you know, some of you had already started putting in footnotes or endnotes. Some of you, I said you need to cite something. You can't just say that. So you're probably going to have more. But one of them needs to be a scholarly, I'm going to add that to this slide as well, a scholarly article or scholarly chapter that we did not read in class. And I have added under the term paper module a page on Canvas that is some outside sources from class that you can look at. They don't have to be, the ones that I provide you are about K-pop. They're related to K-pop. They're people doing things similar to what we've been doing for the past few weeks with K-pop, but we're just not talking about those articles or those chapters. It doesn't have to be an article or a chapter about specifically K-pop. It can just be about whatever it is you're talking about. You know, don't just limit yourself to only the sources that I've put on that page. And those are not all the possible sources either. Those are just ones that I've found, that I've looked over. I'm like, yeah, this would be fine. Okay. And then the bibliography is separate from your notes, and that's going to be 20 points, same as above. It needs to be Chicago style, at least 3 sources. One of the sources has to be scholarly, but not from class. All right, this is the rundown of how you're going to be graded for your final paper. The rubric is on Canvas as well in the assignment summary, so you have access to this. Please read over it. Are there any questions about this? Before I talk about the interpretation, I'll take questions about interpretation in a moment. What you're being graded on, the corrections you need to make, or anything like that. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Oh, yes. Well, so the changes really should, I mean, they're right there for you, really. If you viewed the document that I sent you with my feedback, the changes are already there. So really, you should just be accepting all of those changes, looking over them. And it depends on how your midterm was. Some of you do have some drastic changes that need to be made, while as other people not so much. So it kind of depends. But good question. So yeah, look over your feedback and make sure you make the changes that I have told you that you need to make. Yeah, good question. All right. So let's talk about, so the total is 100 points. Sorry, I forgot about this part. I need to be following along with my notes here. So interpretation. So here's my suggestion to you about adding your interpretation. Well, first of all, how is that going? Do we understand kind of what you should be doing a little bit? Are we kind of getting it? Yes, kind of, probably kind of, right? This is a lot more open-ended than the midterm. right? Because this is all about what really not, and this is about you coming up with what you think about the music video. Not necessarily, it's not what you see, and it's not just what you hear. It's not just what's written in the lyrics or anything like that. This is you trying to make meaning out of that music video based on your own, it's your own interpretation of it, okay? So that's why this part is difficult. So this is my suggestion to you. What you want to do is you want to start with a question. What question do you have about this music video? So for a lot of you, I kind of suggested questions to on your feedback when you are in your feedback when you submitted what music video you were going to write about. So your question can be anything from, how does this music video reflect the identity of the idol? Or how does this music video, what does this music video say about femininity, or about the way that race works in K-pop generally, or something like that? So see how that's like a really broad kind of question, right? And those are the kinds of questions that we've been reading about, right? Or we've been seeing. So you want to ask a question that's something like that. Look back at your feedback. You don't have to ask the question that I suggest you ask and follow, but you're more than welcome to do that. And so then what you want to do is propose what you think the answer is to that question in your writing. So ask the question and then propose an answer to it, which should be based on this third part here, the evidence, the specific things that you've seen or you've heard in the music video that make you say this is the answer to that question. And so you give 2 or 3 pieces of that evidence of what you've written about in your descriptions from earlier, in your musical analysis and your visual analysis with the musical visual connections, right? And then you explain how that evidence proves your proposed answer. So this is my suggestion to the way you write it. So don't just say, this happens in the music video, this happens in the music video, that's why this is the answer. You need to explain, well, this happens in the music video, therefore specifically this thing about it makes me think that this is the answer to the question that I have posed. Okay. So does that make a little bit more sense, or does that make it even worse? Or it doesn't really help at all? I would follow this structure. And if you look at what we've read, like 2 weeks ago when we were looking at what's the thesis, what to do, this is really what we've been reading. This is what those authors, those scholars have done. If you look back, which is why, think back to the week 5 lecture or the live session together. We were trying to identify those different parts of a scholarly article. You're basically doing a mini version of that with this paper. And actually, that's the point of the paper, is that you think about that. So Nada asks, if we researched the meaning of the music video before and got a solid answer, do we talk about what we found out or our own initial reaction? If you want to, you can talk about both. It is possible that the question you want to ask has already been answered. Refer to that answer to help you answer your question, if other people have said it. But I think what will be different, and what really should be different, is that it's not just you saying this is what the music video is, but you have to go back, you have to pull from what you've described, your musical and visual analysis, and use that as evidence for your answer. And I would be very impressed if you found a source that has already done that for your music video. And I don't think any of you, I know several of you who I've looked into your music videos. There are articles, like news articles or blogs or whatever, that say this is what the music video means, but none of them do this. They just say, oh, this is what it is. But none of them explain like how they know that, or like why they know that, or what we can get from the music and the visuals that demonstrate that to us. So does that make sense? So even if it's an answer that's already been given, you're doing something different because you're using that musical and the visual evidence. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, and scholars do that all the time. They'll say, oh, this person said this thing about it, but they didn't really explain why. So I'm going to use this method to explain why. They do that often too. All right, are there any more questions about the final paper? Obviously, if you have questions or concerns, you can email me at any time. Good. So yeah, I would suggest following this structure. All right. So let's hear from our In the News presentation today featuring Keely, Ayana, and Isabella. So I'm going to stop sharing. I don't know who's among you is sharing, but you should have the ability to do so.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, looks good, sounds good.
Okay, great. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about racism and cultural appropriation. We're going to be focusing specifically on the group Baby Monster and the recent controversy they faced during their debut. So what is cultural appropriation? According to Britannica, cultural appropriation takes place when a member of a majority group adopts cultural elements of a minority group in an exploitative, disrespectful, or stereotypical way. For this article, we are looking at how Korean music and idols specifically appropriate Black American hip hop culture and rap music. Looking at Baby Monster and how they recently were under controversy for members wearing box braids and a do-rag. Defining cultural appropriation is important for this. Defining culture is important for this article because we are seeing how Korean artists' perception of hip hop is based on the already highly appropriated concepts within American hip hop and rap. Both wearing box braids and a do-rag are examples of elements of Black culture that have been heavily appropriated within American media. We can see the appropriation of American hip hop culture occurring through the lens of Korean culture and Korean media. The difference between appropriation and appreciating a culture is learning the language and enjoying the food or music from a different country. Appropriation, however, occurs when one is stealing elements from another culture in ways that can be harmful. Examples of this within K-pop are idols using slurs, wearing Black hairstyles, or shooting in locations that are culturally significant to a specific country.
Okay, so before we get to the Baby Monster controversy, let's touch back on some of the terms that we learned this week. This week's reading discusses cosmopolitan strivings, which is the intention to be diverse in K-pop by including foreign dancing bodies. Foreign dancing bodies is a broad term that can be used to mean any foreign inclusion in K-pop videos, something that has been steadily rising since 2013. The article states that cosmopolitan strivings can be defined as authenticity, atmosphere, and sexuality or love. By using foreign dancing bodies in music videos, the intention is to spread authenticity of the art by including the roots of the non-Korean cultures.
Okay, so starting off, who is Baby Monster? Baby Monster is a new girl group that debuted on November 27th of 2023 under YG Entertainment. The group consists of 7 members, Ruka, Parita, Asa, Ahyun, Rami, Rora, and Takita. However, they debuted with only 6 members because their member Ahyun is on hiatus due to health reasons. So the controversy basically states that according to our article, after their debut last month on November 27th with the song Batter Up, the group came under fire because of the looks that 2 other members sported in their music video. The styles that the member Ruka, who's on the left, who was seen wearing a do-rag, and Chiquita on the right,
who was seen with bright yellow box braids, was called out by netizens for being forms of cultural appropriation. However, fans were more upset at their company, YG Entertainment, for setting them up, um, since the company has had previous issues with cultural appropriation in the past.
So the first article we talked about was YG Entertainment's Baby Monster Cultural Appropriation Controversy Explained by Jessica Duhey. The author gives a brief history of YG Entertainment as a whole, speaking about the success of YG as one of the big three groups, with groups like Big Bang and 2NE1 gaining massive success. This success, however, also came with the controversy surrounding drugs and gambling, leading to 2NE1 disbanding and Big Bang going on indefinite hiatus. YG Entertainment managed to maintain its standing after debuting Blackpink and later group Treasure. In November, Baby Monster officially debuted with their song Batter Up, which received backlash due to the two members who wore a do-rag and box braids. This controversy came after the group had already received backlash due to member Ahyun's use of racial slurs, resulting in her being left from the group's debut. The reaction of fans to this article shows a backlash for the company's role in the appropriation of Black culture within Baby Monster's video. The article gives a timeline of YG Entertainment and shows how the company played a role in the controversy that followed Baby Monster's debut. This article speaks about appropriation, but also shows how YG has dealt with past issues with other groups. YG Entertainment is not a stranger to drama, and this article was able to provide more context into why Baby Monster received so much backlash. It speaks about the cultural appropriation that took place, as well as the issues that the group had pre-debut due to one of the members saying racial slurs.
Similar to what Isabella mentioned, my article discusses how the group and YG Entertainment have received much backlash for the appropriation of Black culture that is shown within the outfit choices in the music video. Many fans jumped to blame YG Entertainment, stating that the girls were set up and that YG Entertainment has done this sort of thing before. And some fans said that they were unstanding or not being a fan of the group because of the appropriation of Black culture. During the uproar, a controversy involving member Ahyun that happened in May was brought back up. Isabella briefly mentioned it, but Baby Monster member Ahyun has already been caught saying racial slurs multiple times during a video that surfaced of her performing a rap song that contains racial slurs. The song is Feeling Myself by Nicki Minaj. Fans found this disappointing and inexcusable due to the fact that Ahyun is apparently fluent in English, which means that she likely understood the meaning of the word when she used it. The video of the performance was taken at her high school, so it's fairly recent considering that she is 16 and still in high school. Fans say that it is now 2023, so saying that Korean idols don't know any better doesn't work anymore. Some fans also believe that it should be required by companies for K-pop idols to learn about racial slurs so that idols can't use ignorance and so-called cultural differences as an excuse to appropriate culture and say racist things. Additionally, Ahyun did not debut with Baby Monster in Batter Up, as she recently went on hiatus due to health reasons. This has sparked debate on whether she truly is on hiatus because of her health or if YG Entertainment put her on hiatus due to the controversy that she had in May resurfacing as the group got ready to debut. Overall, there seems to be a split between the fan opinions on who is to blame for the cultural appropriation, and as of now, there's still been no official statement or apology from Baby Monster and YG Entertainment, despite the loud backlash from fans.
Okay, and so as mentioned in our third article by BNN Network and previously mentioned by my group members, the heart of the controversy with Baby Monster is that members Ruka and Takeda's appearance in their MV Batter Up. Their appearance caused a wave of criticism amongst fans and netizens due to member Ruka wearing a do-rag, which is a piece of cloth that has strong ties to African American culture and is traditionally used to keep the hair in place. And Takeda wearing box braids, which is a protective style amongst females in the African American community. Both of these styles were singled out as an example of inappropriate cultural borrowing. Many upset fans pointed out YG's Entertainment's history of cultural appropriation with other artists under their company. Due to this controversy, it has caused an increase for the demand of mandatory cultural appropriation education for idols by both fans and critics. Um, the hope of this is that by making idols and forcing companies to be aware of cultural sensitivity, it can hopefully help these types of situations be avoided in the future. As the article points out, this is not an isolated event, but part of a wider issue in media and shines light on the delicate balance and responsibility that comes with incorporating elements from cultures other than one owns in popular media. Um, However, beyond the controversy, the article states that although the controversy happened within a K-pop group, the situation isn't just a K-pop issue, but also a global issue. As music goes beyond borders, so should the desire to understand other cultures, as well as respect for the culture that inspiration is drawn from. The conversation that this controversy sparked showcased the need for global conversations about what is cultural appropriation and what can be considered appreciation, especially when it comes to utilizing foreign attributes in popular media. All right, thank you for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
Wow, excellent presentation, very clear. And we hit like every point. I feel like I learned everything about this controversy. Okay, put your questions in the chat. I'm gonna ask my question, which is, and I feel comfortable asking you three this because I know all three of you kind of like K-pop at least a little bit. Why do you think it's always, why is it YG? Why is YG constantly doing this? I mean, I feel like one of my biggest disappointments was when CL from 2NE1 started doing her solo career and she started appropriating, and she had already kind of been doing stuff, and just YG never wants to admit it. Like they always do this and they just never want to admit it. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Personally, I do like a lot of groups from YG, and honestly, it feels like YG does things like this repeatedly just for attention. Because if you like honestly with a lot of K-pop groups, most of them come from like SM or big, well, now Hype or like JYP, but like not many groups come from YG, at least not nowadays. And so it feels like whenever there's like a new group coming out or like an artist doing something new, there's going to be like hints of like things that they know is not okay just because they want that attention. So it's sort of like all publicity is good publicity, even if it's bad.
I also feel like since it's already like happened so much too, like what you said, like it's happened so frequently within the company, it's probably more normalized.
Yeah, very good points. So Owen asks, has anything concrete happened to YG since they have been known to do this in the past?
I don't know if like because I know that the batter up video still received like a lot of views, although it had negative backlash, it still was, I think, a successful debut. So I don't know necessarily if they have received like monetary like consequences or anything. I'm not sure.
Honestly, to add on to that, I don't really like I haven't seen anything about YG like having to like do anything about like cultural appropriation and stuff of that sort within the company. Um, the last thing, like the last big YG thing that I can remember is like having to do with like members of Big Bang. So it's but like that's totally differently related other like topics. So on the cultural appropriation, I don't really think so.
When it comes to this video specifically, I was just doing some research outside of the articles, just on TikTok and stuff. And I did see that apparently this video is very successful, when it comes to views within the first week. So I don't think there really have been any consequences. And going through the group's Twitter as well, I don't even really see it being mentioned anymore.
It's almost kind of like, and I've been watching a lot of videos about people talking about this phenomenon where something, uh, this media comes out and it gets a lot of backlash, but because it gets so much backlash, more people go to watch it, and then it actually ends up bringing it more success because of it. So it's kind of like this double-edged sword where, you know, you can point these things out, but then you end up actually supporting it in some way just because you're interested in learning more about it. So do you think, well, we kind of answered this question. How much do you think the controversy impacted Baby Monster's debut success? And do you think that they'll recover? Do you think that they'll recover?
I've heard rumors. I don't know if it's true or not. I couldn't find like an official statement, but I saw people saying that they were already on a hiatus, but I can't confirm or deny if that's true or not.
Also, I feel like it might have like definitely hindered like their like international success, maybe like a little bit, since like obviously like there has been like a statement yet. So I feel like international fans are probably like still on the fence. But I feel like with Korean fans, maybe not so much. I feel like the only thing that I saw with like their debut was um a lot of like fans didn't like the song for like Baby Monster. It was like a lot of people thought that the song fit Blackpink more. That was the only like negative impact that I saw like with their debut.
Well, it'll be hard for any group coming out of YG, any girl group, to not live past Blackpink's kind of image. Anyways, so from Nick, do you think that YG groups doing things like this come as a benefit in terms of garnering exposure?
I guess you did sort of touch on it when we were talking about answering the other questions. It's sort of like, although this is something that I think is not great for their image, it's still bringing them viewers. So I guess I think it is somewhat benefiting them, and that's why YG continues to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen this music video because I'm not really following YG right now, but I mean, we all know about it now because of this controversy, right? And let's take this last question from Haley. Do you know if only YG is doing this? Are there other companies that have also had this bad of controversies as well?
Okay. YG isn't the only one doing it because like it's happened with like other groups in the past. Like just like to name a few, there's like EXO when they did like Coco Bop, and then you had like Kai's hair, which was like some weird like dreadlock thingy. And then you had like BTS, like early BTS with like Namjoon's hair, which there was like a huge joke of like Namjoon like 4C hair. Like it's been seen with like other groups and like they have received like the backlash for it. It's just YG constantly does it with like every group that they have. Like it's just they're just a repeat offender.
Yeah, YG has not necessarily from the beginning, but from like the early 2010s or so. So YG is founded by Yang Hyun Suk. Is that his name? Yeah. And he was one of the dancers for Soltejian Boys. Um, so he has always been kind of a hip hop, kind of new dance hip hop style musician, or artist, I guess, musical artist. And really since the 2010s, I remember, not originally, but a lot of the groups, and there's really not that many of them, Psy, like Gangnam Style, that's YG, 21, which is I Am the Best, Big Bang, which they have a bunch of numbers, Fantastic Baby, Haru Haru, I can't even think about Good Boy, all those songs. They've constantly had this kind of hip hop style to a lot of their groups, particularly since the early 2010s. And so because of that, they end up doing this a lot, are falling under these controversies because they're trying to bring that sense of that quote unquote hip hop aesthetic, right? But they do it uncritically in a lot of ways. For a lot of people, it actually comes off as offensive. So that's why YG tends to be known for this, just because they do a lot more hip hop type things than other groups or other companies. Good. Well, thank you so much for, well, was there any last things anyone wanted to say? Keely, Isabella, Ayana?
Nope, I think we covered it all. Thank you guys.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. All right. So, let me share my screen now. Okay. Chat up. So good. So let's talk about this a little bit more. Let's dig a little bit more into what the reading and the videos have to say about this. So chapter 4, we're in chapter 4 now. This is the last chapter, Identity and Expression in K-pop. Section 1, Appropriation or Appreciation, Racialized Others in K-pop Music Videos. And Isabella and Keely gave us a wonderful introduction to these very these words that people have a lot of different perspectives on them. And what they're really supposed to mean. So we'll come up with our own maybe in class in a little bit here. But let's all keep an open mind, number one, and let's be respectful and open to one another's ideas. I've read through the blogs. It seems like most of us have a pretty similar opinion on this issue. But you know, there can always be quote unquote the odd one out. But we welcome any discussion. We want to have a respectful discussion about this issue. So why do K-pop music videos sometimes include non-East Asian looking people? So it's very important to realize that what we're talking about here is this mixture of white, Black, Latinx folks who show up or who show up in these music videos. So they don't look Asian. And we've kind of learned that that's for a particular reason, maybe. So Keely brought up the word here. Actually, you brought up all the words. So we have foreign dancing bodies, right? So what does foreign dancing body mean? How do you think Seji uses that term? What does Seji mean with this term? Can we remember? Yeah, good. So foreign dancers, but they're not always, she doesn't mean that they're just dancing. Yeah, I like this, yeah, good. Ayana and Keely, oh, and that's good. So yeah, she uses dancing, but she's kind of talking about it more like how we learned about the term choreography, right? So first of all, it's these people who this term indicates, they don't look Asian or East Asian particularly. And they're typically, they look white, Black, or Latinx, however, you know, that's supposed to look like. And so we know that's on kind of, there's something particular about that because it's not necessarily a marketing ploy, since a lot of people who like K-pop are actually themselves non-East Asian Asian people. So there's something else that's going on here. But they're not just dancing, right? They're just kind of like extras. I think, yeah, Ayana used this word. They're just extras in the music video. Sometimes they are dancers. In this example here from Taeyang's Ring-a-Linga, they are actually dancers. And that's the point of them being there, is that they are Black Latinx dancers based in Los Angeles. So we'll talk about why that specifically is there. But they appear and they're very evidently not Asian. That's kind of the point, right? And so Seji says this is because, or this is partially because of this phenomenon of internationalization, right? So we've heard this word. Globalization is another word you can use, which we've talked about quite a few times, excuse me. So K-pop is geared increasing toward an international audience, right? And so Seiji says that the reason that they're doing this is because they have cosmopolitan strivings. So Keeley gave a great explanation of what this word means. What is cosmopolitanism? Has anyone heard this? Cosmopolitanism. A lot of you answered this pretty succinctly in your blogs too. What do you think that means? Has anyone heard this term before? Cosmopolitan? We don't hear it very much in North America. We have another word that we use a lot in North America. But if you go somewhere like Europe, or I mean Asia, you might really in Europe you'll hear this term is actually it's actually originally from a British theorist. So cosmopolitanism, a lot of you talked about this. You know, the cosmopolitan strivings are about having this facade of diversity and inclusion, right? Or actually being diverse and being inclusive in your group or in your society. But what cosmopolitans particularly means about that is not really the way that we think of diversity and inclusion within the context of the United States and even Canada, like in North America, where our population is already diverse. We have people who are already citizens, who are from a plethora of backgrounds, right? And that's kind of both the beauty of North America, but because of that, we also have a very deeply entrenched history of racism and discrimination on the basis of those backgrounds. But what cosmopolitan really is referring to is this idea of diversity in a global society. So not just here in our town of Lawrence, we're cosmopolitan, but rather like globally speaking, we're a part of this cosmos, if you will, which is Greek for earth, or world, where all these people exist and everyone is included and can be a part of this global community. So Lawrence or KU can be diverse, but that doesn't mean it's cosmopolitan, because cosmopolitan is like a bunch of people who hail from different citizenships or different nations, who hail from around the world. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the nuance here. So when we think about diversity in North America, we usually mean people who are already from even the United States, born in the United States, but that's not really necessarily what cosmopolitan is referring to. Good. But yeah, so the strivings part, like Ayana said here and Keeley said here, it's that desire to look diverse, not necessarily more than you are, but just to have that facade. You might actually be, and you really do look, your group does look diverse. But it's the striving part we can think of as wanting to be like that, right? Good. So let's talk about race in Korea, because as you can imagine, race is very different in South Korea than it is in the United States. So this is you probably can't really read this very well, but this is the best infographic I really could find on this. So 4% of South Korea's 50 million person population is non-Korean. Only 4% is non-Korean. So if you think about in the United States, 4% is like the amount of, I think it's the amount of, for example, Native American people who are in the United States. I think Asian Americans are more now, or who's considered under Asian American is more than 4% now. I think it's like 6 or 7%. But you know, so 4% is one quote unquote minority racial group within the United States. But all of South Korea's minority racial groups are composed together, make up 4%, right? And within this 4%, that's what this infographic, this pie chart here, is a laydown of that distribution. The vast majority of them, well, number one, 54% of them are actually are ethnically Chinese. So the vast majority of them are non-Korean Asian people. So they're not white people, they're not Black people, they're not Latinx people. Only 8% is actually from the US, which is quite large. But then the way they do surveys, because it's based on nationality or based on your ancestral citizenship only by country, that doesn't really count for, well, are you Black and from the US? Are you Asian and from the US? Are you white? Are you indigenous? Those different kind of identities that all exist, they don't get counted within the kinds of studies they do in South Korea. So there's a lot of different reasons for this, and this was wonderfully brought up in the controversy. In general, this pretty homogenous society, homogenous means that in a society, most people have this similar, particularly ethnic background. Vast majority of people in South Korea are ethnically Korean, right? So partially in because of that, most people in South Korea adopt what's called a colorblind ideology. And Seji talks about this. What is a colorblind ideology? We hear this a lot in North America, or at least I feel like I hear about this a lot. But colorblind ideology, what do we think? Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. What someone might say is they, quote unquote, do not see race, or what Keely said here is not looking at people based on the race. And so because of that, people tend not seeing race, hearing that, and you are welcome to think what you would like about this concept, or if you believe that this way of thinking about race, or quote unquote not thinking about race, if you think it's fine, that's totally you. But within the context of the article and within the context of studies about race, it tends to be this belief that ignoring racial differences is going to manage to secure racial equality and equity, right? So what is equity as opposed to equality? Has anyone heard this? These are two different things. It used to be racial equality is what we've heard, but now you'll see the word equity a lot more. So, yeah, good. Great, Tana. Fairness. Equity means fairness. So you want things to necessarily, equality would suggest that everybody's on, equal, on the same playing field, right? Which is what Owen said here, right? Everyone is treated equally. Well, so the idea of actually racial equity has become a lot more prominent because, well, you can say in policy that, oh, we're going to treat everybody the same. But when everybody's histories due to their background is different, not everyone has the same access to opportunities as everyone else, particularly in the context of the United States or in the context of Korea, the same opportunities afforded to white people descended from European settlers or European Americans, anyone who can be considered under white. People who are not white are not going to necessarily have the same opportunities. So that's why we say equity. Oftentimes you'll hear equity is more important than equality for that reason. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the idea. But colorblind ideology is this idea that if we don't think about race, or we don't quote unquote see race, then we will be able to achieve those equalities and equities. So you can do what you with, but most people in South Korea vastly, they kind of have this concept of how race should be approached. So the 3 reasons for incorporating the foreign dancing body in K-pop. So what were the 3 reasons? Some of us put the 3 reasons in our blog post, but not everyone. Healy mentioned one of them, I think. So I'm just going to move us along here. Good. So it elevates the image. Yeah, so the question is, what's the reason? What are the 3 reasons that the text says for incorporating foreign dancing bodies? 3 reasons. Good. So I'll get started talking about some. The first one we have is authenticity, right? So this is what we're talking about, what Owen says here, elevate the image of the idol star power. So that's kind of on the right track. That's kind of correct. It's more of the nuance of, because Korean people are performing something that's originally, especially in hip hop, they're performing something that's originally Black or African American music. They try and make up for it by including Black people or people who look Black in their music videos, right? And so in order to do this, the idea is that it gives the Korean artist kind of this image of being knowledgeable of this culture, or even part of the culture, and therefore it's respectful, right? So that's kind of the first main reason that foreign dancing bodies are included. So the second one, atmosphere. This one is a little bit more, you can take this one in a lot of different directions. It's kind of up to you. And she does a lot of different things with this as well. So atmosphere. So this is kind of what a lot of us have been saying, like in our blogs, about the desire to appear inclusive or appear diverse, right? So it's this idea that by including these foreign dancing bodies, you send this message like, oh, even though you're a foreigner viewer, you can be a part of K-pop too, right? And this goes along with what Owen was talking about here. This really is used, or the idea is that by creating this atmosphere of diversity, it really highlights the status of the K-pop idols, not just as Korean idols, but as like global stars, right? It makes them look like they are globally desired. And so that can kind of boost their status. And then the last one, so sexuality / love, but there's something particular about the sexuality. Who is sexuality really focused on? Or when it comes to foreign dancing bodies, particularly, who tends to be the foreign dancing bodies of the sexuality? I actually kind of thought Seji could title this. Yeah, exactly. Women. It's a women's sexuality. There are some uses of men's sexual or romantic prowess, foreign men. She talked about one example, which is actually one of my favorite albums. It's from one of my favorite albums. But for the most part, they're more interested in incorporating foreign women and expressing their sexuality, right? So there's kind of 2 things that this does, neither of which are geared towards these foreign women, right? So the first one is that they convey the Korean man's sexual prowess and desirability, right? So if it's a Korean, it's a man who's the idol, it makes the man look globally sexually desirable, right? So it kind of gives him his sense of, yeah, I guess his sense of kind of hyper masculine, sexuality. And then the other thing is something that it's more of an invisible. It's not something you're going to see, but it's prompted by its absence, and that is, it keeps Korean women from looking like sexual objects or sexual beings in any way. It keeps them looking chaste, right? So this idea that Korean women have this kind of sexual purity to them, whereas foreign women, they are kind of more sexually promiscuous, or they just have this hyper sense of sexuality, right? So it's doing this by not including Korean women playing this part. Now, more and more, you will see Korean women idols who do take a more of a sexual kind of agency in their work. Like Hyuna is a very common female idol who's referred to as being this kind of powerhouse for women's sexual empowerment and stuff from Korea. So, maybe this could be updated a little bit, but in general, you won't see Korean women be treated as the sexual objects that foreign women often are. So, but there's even a nuance in this as well, right? So what's kind of the difference here? So Seji talks about this. There's a difference between in K-pop music videos and how Black women are sexualized versus white women. She doesn't really talk about Latina women very much. I guess it doesn't really show up much in music videos, but this difference definitely does. So we have this example from Rain's La Song. And so he kisses this woman, and then her breasts and her butt get really big, like in a shadow. They kind of like grow. It's very weird actually to watch. But then you see like in Gary's shower later, he has this woman, this white woman, following him around the entire time, and she's doing all these like sexually suggestive acts. So what's kind of the difference between these two ways, or between these two examples? And it's really not different from the way that Black women versus white women are sexualized, even within US culture, generally speaking. Yeah, good, Owen. That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, so see I think this is one of the ways. I think there's another way too. So if you're thinking something different, please share that with us. So yeah, the white woman is kind of shown to have a little bit more agency, right? She's actually doing something throughout the video and being she's enacting the sexuality. Whereas the Black woman in this case, she kind of has the sexuality thrust upon her in a way, right? And then I think there's yeah, good. Ayana has it here. Yeah, the bodies themselves are very different, right? So the Black woman is made to be sexual for her kind of quote unquote voluptuousness, right? And her body is the focus of the sexuality. Whereas the white woman in Gary's shower later, she's clearly, she kind of has that very model-like look to her, or was stereotypical. She's very thin, she has very small breasts, and her body is not really as much of the object, so much as like her actions kind of become the object. Yeah, exactly. Which I don't know. Does anyone think that's very different from what we tend to see in United States visual culture, North American visual culture? I personally don't really think so. I think this is pretty common in sexuality. Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, but I feel like I see this a lot. So let's talk about this. Authenticity. Is inclusion enough? A lot of you brought this question up. So this is going to be a brief discussion we can have here. The next few parts are just discussions. So if you'd like to actually voice yourself, you're more than welcome to do that with your mic. So is including Black/African American and Latinx people in music videos enough to respect the cultural roots of hip hop? Why or why not? And do we think that inclusion equates to cosmopolitanism, so that true state of being globally diverse, not just having people of different races there, but having this kind of global community? What do we think? Okay. So London says it doesn't really equate to like true cosmopolitanism necessarily. It's kind of just like giving a superficial idea of it. Yeah, I think Seji tends to agree with you. So why do we think that though? Why is it superficial? What makes it superficial and not quote unquote sincere? What is it? Because I saw this sentiment a lot in our blogs, but I didn't see anyone pinpoint why. And you hear and you see people make these kinds of conjectures a lot, but when it comes to these issues, but I rarely see someone thoughtfully explain why. That's the harder part. What do we think? Okay, so novelty. So it's kind of like by doing this, they're really just trying to have something, so their intent maybe is different from actual cosmopolitan kind of ideal of having that diversity, because there's this issue of novelty, like wanting to have something particularly unique or exotic, if you will. Yeah, exactly. This is a really great point that Owen brings up. So oftentimes, like people like Seo Taiji, but which is in the 90s, which is much later than what this article is about. They actually are passionate. Taeyong is very passionate about hip hop. And I actually think this example, if you've seen it, Ringalinga, I think it's actually I think it's fine, personally. I personally think it's fine. And Seiji thinks it's fine, but some people didn't think it was fine. Some people thought it was just trying to look cool. But yeah, a lot of times it can just kind of feel like it looks like they're just intending to put something exotic, yeah, in the music video by incorporating these quote unquote foreign people in it. Yeah, because of that visual, like Haley said here, because of the visual component to it, it can make it harder for it to feel sincere. Oh, now this is interesting. So outside of the music video, that's a good point, Nada. Do these idols actually have these kinds of friend groups or artist groups that they're a part of? Possibly. I'm not sure. It depends, idol to idol. I think someone like Taeyong probably does, but not everyone does. And also the thing is, a lot of the people who actually end up doing this are people who have done training or lived in North America, particularly have lived in either the United States or Canada at some point, where this is, we talk about this all the time, right? But I think that's a really great point. How do they empathize? Empathy, very important here, right? Are they empathizing through their art with these people, with that culture? So empathy is a little bit different from sympathy, right? So sympathy is, I know what it's like, therefore I can understand. Empathize is almost like, I really can't know what it's like because I'm not you, but I can try to understand, and I will try to understand, right? So that's why empathy is definitely a huge thing here, right? So yes, how they're included. Thank you, Keely. Yeah, definitely. The way that Sejic describes it, a lot of them are being treated like props in some way. That's a really good point. So it's kind of hard to say, especially when backup dancers themselves are treated like props, no matter their race or ethnic background. Even Korean backup dancers and K-pop idols, they act as props to support the main idol or idol group, right? So yeah, it really takes what you're saying here, true involvement within the video, not just kind of being there, right? Yeah, good. I love to hear these opinions for sure. So on the other side of including foreigners, we have, and some of us understood this difference and some of us didn't really pronounce this difference. We have Korean idols who take on cultural elements of other people's culture, right? So we have this controversy, which is extremely similar to the controversy we learned about today. And this is appropriation versus appreciation, right? So this is interesting. If you've ever heard this or seen this music video, know this song. So the song and the music video for Chicken Noodle Soup, which features J-Hope, who's from BTS originally, and Becky G. Becky G is a Mexican-American pop singer. She's really great, actually. I love her music. So the song and the music video have been praised as appreciative, right? So it's a revamp of a song called Chicken Noodle Soup that's from the early 2000s by Young B and DJ Webster. And they received royalties from this remake of the song, and they showed a lot of appreciation for it. There didn't seem to be anything weird about the recreation of these people's songs. Both of them are Black hip hop artists and musicians. They're not as active today, but they were pretty active in the 2000s. But then, of course, netizens or fans, right, did not respond very well. Not everyone responded very well to J-Hope's lock style hair, calling it cultural appropriation, right? And I thought Adiola, who is not a scholar, she's just a YouTuber, you know, you don't have to agree with her at all. I don't agree with her on every issue or anything like that, but she is interesting to watch. I like YouTubers, they're fun, they're interesting. But I thought this quote here really summed up this situation. So the BTS boys never use hairstyles likening to Black ones except for their hip hop songs. This makes it obvious that J-Hope was appropriating Black aesthetic, taking this hairstyle that Black people are discriminated against for having themselves, and used it as a costume to fit this hip hop stage. So what this is an example of is racialization or racial coding, which is when you try and make someone or something appear as if it is a certain race, by using racial stereotypes or things that are typically associated with people of that race. And it can also be a term that refers to emphasizing a particular person's race. So someone who's Korean in some form of media might be racialized even more as Korean if they are made to wear like Korean style clothing or speak in like a heavy accent or something like that, right? So what do we think about this? Here's our second discussion here. Appropriation or appreciation? What's the line between the two? And Isabella gave us a really good definition of one of them. Who gets to decide if it's appropriation or if it's appreciation? And why do you think K-pop idols and companies continue to appropriate Black culture for hip-hop aesthetics, even though fans continually give them backlash? What do we think here? I mean, clearly this is something that continues to go on and on. Good. So yeah, London brings up what a lot of us were saying earlier, right? The more controversy, the more views. The more views, the more attention, right? Exactly. They kind of use the bad publicity. Maybe they do. Probably they do. I think I've been pretty well convinced of that today, at least. Yeah, it's not positive, but it does garner attention. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, and that's a good point. So, so the people who are a part of the culture that is being commodified or appropriated, they're the ones that get to decide, right? If it's respectful or if it's exploitative, right? And Keely agrees with that. I tend to agree with that too. But I also see that there are some people, there have been occasions where people who are part of the culture that is appropriated or appreciated get pitted against each other, because some people might think it's appropriation, but some people might not really care and they think it's okay and think it's appreciation. You'll see this a lot among Korean, Asian American people, actually, For example, I like kimono, which is Japanese style clothing. Some people who are Japanese, and particularly Japanese Americans, think that it's very appropriative that white people and even Black people and, you know, just anyone who's not Asian would wear kimono just in everyday life, without proper kinds of attributes to it. Whereas other people, especially people who are like from Japan, they don't really care. They don't see it as like bad that people do that. So they end up getting pitted against each other. Sorry, I need to put my charger on. So I agree. I think it should be the group, but it's very difficult sometimes to find consensus within a single group, right? I mean, Black people are not a monolith, right? I mean, and to think that all Black people think the same thing, even about this idea of Black culture, is in itself can be racist, right? Yeah. Yeah, between North America and Southeast Asian views. Sorry, hold on. Yeah, exactly what Ayana said here. Yeah, it depends on the person within the culture. Yeah, exactly. People can have vastly different ideas, right? And then good. I don't know what you mean by SEA, except maybe South/East Asia views on race, Owen, because while it seems obviously racist to us, I wonder if Korean perspective makes it feel less severe. Well, yes, the Korean perspective, which there is no singular Korean perspective on the issue, right? But like we were learning earlier, from the colorblind ideology, these companies like YG tend to say, well, we don't know any better because we're Korean, so it's different, right? But people have told them over and over again, fans particularly, right? Yes, very good, Nada. Yeah, Nada, you bring up a great thing, a great point, which I tend to take for granted, although I'm someone who has friends from a lot of different countries and backgrounds, right? In North America, not just the US, but in Canada too, particularly, race is huge because of the history of racism as a foundation for the countries, right? And that's just not the same thing in Korea, right? Or in most other modern nation states, it's not really the same thing. So we're very sensitive to these issues, right? And we talk about it a lot. So it can be difficult for people who don't have this kind of history that they grow up with to really try and understand that perspective. So we do have to be mindful of that. But, you know, there comes a time where, well, okay, this is just my opinion. There comes a time when people are telling you something over and over again, and you just keep doing the same mistake, that you kind of have to be held accountable, right? Oh, no, I don't think Korean fans complain very often about this. Some probably do. Some I'm sure do. But not necessarily. All right. I just had this last thing here, because I think this is really interesting, and this is something that no one talks about, and I was happy to find a video that even mentioned it. The two figures of the Indian, right? Figures of the Indian. Has anyone heard this before? So these are like the this idea of the Native North Americans, indigenous people of Turtle Island, and they have this particular look about them, right? And that kind of stereotype of the Indian is used to exploit or misrepresent Native North Americans, right? And you see this, and you see this other kind of figure of the Indian in K-pop, which is this figure of South Asia Indian. And you see both of these show up in K-pop. And it's just pretty, you know, look out for this. We don't really have time to talk about it. I wanted to talk about it more, but It's pretty interesting to think about as well, or important to think about, right? Especially, I think probably we watch, especially for talking about the history of racism in North America, we watch videos like this MC Hmong Indian boy. I don't know if anyone watched this. But how could anyone, even in the year that it came out, 2009, thought this was okay? I don't know. It's something that you would see from white people in like the 1960s, maybe in the 1950s. Yeah. All right. Yeah, you would think, Allie, that other foreign audiences, and I think a lot of South Asian fans have brought this to people's attention, especially because there's a lot of people from South and Southeast Asia in Korea. They're a huge population among that 4% of foreigners. So it is becoming more and more obvious. Good. Sorry, Aeon, I want to read your last thing here, but we need to finish here. So okay, thank you all so much for the wonderful conversation today. You have an exit quiz due on Friday, like normal. Work on your final paper. Email me with questions. Yeah, so this week you should be working on your interpretation and starting to do your end notes as well. So thank you so much. I can take questions if we have them. Yes, good luck, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you, Keely.